drop and give me 25. I'm the gunny.
It's time for the gunny.
The quarter deck. Lights. Get online right now. You got 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Hello, my bunch of knuckle-dragging, beer-drinking, hard-charging devil dogs. You're listening to The Quarter Deck. I am your host, Miguel, the Gunny Signs.
Get off the bus!
I do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend
The Constitution of the United States.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to another episode here on The Quarter Deck in our first week of October, getting closer and closer to our Marine Corps ball season, and looking forward to hearing about all these amazing celebrations that are going to be upcoming here now towards the end of the month. And of course, next month in November, that we celebrate our Marine Corps birthday on 10 November of 1775, when it was born, when it became an actual thing, and that is where we come from. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we start getting into those dates. But this week on The Quarter Deck, we're going to go ahead and move on and talk a little bit more about our VA benefits that we've been talking about in the past couple of weeks. This is going to be our first time that we're actually moving into our introduction into the VA healthcare system. So this will be our introduction into that. So we look forward to talking about that in this episode today. We are going to talk a little bit more about the planning and what the 1st Marine Division is doing in our reading of our book, No Greater Friend, No Worst Enemy. And I got to tell you guys, the book is getting more and more intense because it's getting closer and closer to the time that my unit flew in to Kuwait in preparations for this whole planning that they're doing now, to actually put it into effect, put it into place, and allowing us to be able to actually execute all this planning that is being put into place. With our hero highlights that we've been talking about here, last week, we talked about Private First Class Harold Christ Agerholm. This week, we're talking about Private First Class Richard B.D. Anderson. So I look forward to talking a little bit more about him and finding out exactly what he did and what his actions were that earned him to be awarded the nation's highest award, which is the Congressional Medal of Honor. The Quarter Deck. One of the very important things that a lot of service members, especially when they're about to get out of the service, they kind of neglect or they put in the back burner because they really don't think about it, is medical care. The whole time that you're on active duty service, you have medical there on base through the Navy clinic or wherever you go to have all these coverages. Now, I've asked a lot of service members throughout the whole time that I was teaching the separations classes that they're going to have medical coverage throughout the time that they're in active duty service. But what happens when they get out of the service? How long do they continue to have their TRICARE coverage under the Marine Corps? That's an important thing for them to do. And the main answer that I usually got from a lot of these service members is, I have 6 months of healthcare coverage after I get out of the service. And unfortunately, that's not correct. At midnight of your last day of active duty service, that is when your medical coverage under the TRICARE program will end. So after that, there is no more healthcare coverage that the transitioning service member is going to have, because the day following their last day of active duty service, now they are an actual veteran. So they no longer have the TRICARE coverage. Now, they do have programs where you can actually apply through TRICARE to extend that, but that's something you're going to have to pay for separately, and that's not my area of expertise or anything like that. So I always tell them, hey, check with TRICARE, go to their website, call them, find out what programs are available, and if you may qualify for a lot of those programs that they may offer for you. But what I want to talk about and kind of focus on today is actually VA healthcare. A lot of people have heard horror stories about VA healthcare, that they don't do anything for you, that they take forever to give you treatment and all that stuff and blah, blah, blah. Now, I'm speaking only from my experience, that all the times that I have used VA healthcare now that I'm out of the service. Now, as a retiree, I do qualify for TRICARE for life through the Marine Corps because I served over 20 years of active duty service and honorably retired from active duty. So I do have TRICARE coverage that I'm able to go ahead and get seen on base or with any doctor, and TRICARE is going to cover my stuff. Now, with the VA healthcare system, that is another way for you to be able to get healthcare coverage if you do not have any kind of healthcare coverage or anything like that. Now, what does it actually cover? VA healthcare covers care for your physical and mental health. Okay, so it covers a lot of spectrums of things, and it includes a vast range of services, leading from checkups to any kind of surgeries, home health care if that's something that you may need. And it also includes prescription medications and any kind of medical equipment that you may need to have now that you're getting out of the service. With that being said, a lot of active duty service members have ongoing care that they have to have once they get out of the service. An example of that is like sleep apnea. If you were prescribed some kind of sleep apnea machine, a CPAP or a VPAP, whatever you were prescribed while you were in active duty service, now that you're getting out of the service, once you actually apply and get approved for VA healthcare, they will continue to provide the medical equipment, any new machines that you may need and so forth and everything else for the rest of your life as long as you qualify for the VA healthcare. So that's something that you want to consider, because sometimes that kind of things can get actually pretty expensive for you to have that. Now we go back to our favorite website, which is va.gov. That is your go-to site for you to get any answers or anything regarding any of the benefits that we have been talking about for the past couple of weeks, or maybe you just want to gather more information, or simply do an application to actually apply for you for VA healthcare system. Now, there's different ways for you to actually apply for VA healthcare. You can actually go in person to the VA health facility there, get an application, fill it out in person with a copy of your DD-214. Now, make sure that you have a copy. Most of the time, all the VA clinics will make a copy of your DD-214 and send it up with your application to get it looked at and then decide whether you're approved or not approved for the VA healthcare and all those things that you have. Now, the VA healthcare system ties in a lot with the VA disability compensation that we talked about before. Depending on your rating, your conditions, the injuries that you have, that will help determine a lot in your application when you apply for VA healthcare. That will determine, how much coverage you're going to have. So somebody that has 100% permanent total rating is going to have 100% coverage through the VA healthcare system. That means they're not going to have to worry about paying any kind of copays, any medication payments or anything like that, or anything that they get done, it's going to be covered. Well as somebody who has maybe, let's say, 30%, 50% of their healthcare coverage may only qualify for certain percentages of the healthcare system coverage, and they may have to pay copays. And for those individuals that maybe didn't apply for disability compensation, but yet they need to get seen through the VA healthcare system and they are eligible for the VA healthcare, their only difference with them is that they're going to have to pay for, some of the medication, the copays and all that stuff and everything for them to be able to get seen. If it's something that, it's not service connected or anything like that, and those individuals that didn't apply for anything, of course, that's going to pertain to them. But those other individuals with a lower rating, that will make them eligible to still get seen for that stuff. But if it's not considered to be service connected or it's not in their disability claim, then they will have to pay for the copay and certain percentages of the health care that they receive for whatever care they may need. But again, the first thing you got to do is actually check your eligibility. You have to check your eligibility for you to make sure to see if you meet the criteria to make sure you're ready to go. Now, what the VA does is they have a process for you to check your eligibility. Now, they can do a lot of things for you online. Like I said, on va.gov, it'll give you the options to see if you actually qualify for that. It'll tell you some of the things you're going to need in order for you to actually qualify for that. And some of the things that you want to look at, that they're going to take a look at for you to see if your eligibility is, first of all, of course, did you serve in active duty military, whether it's naval or air service, including you were being called up for National Guard or Reserve by any kind of federal order? So they'll look at that stuff. Make sure that you did not receive a dishonorable discharge. That can make you ineligible if you did receive a dishonorable discharge. And you have to meet at least one of the service requirements for enrollment. Okay. So you have to have served at least 24 months in a row without a break. That's called continuous service. Okay. For a full active duty period of service. And this pertains more to like the reservists, that they were called into active duty service and they were activated for at least, a 24-month period or 2 years. That you possibly were discharged for some kind of service-connected disability. So, everybody going to med boards and stuff like that. That can make you eligible for that. Or maybe you were discharged for a hardship or early out for whatever reason. That's an eligibility that you can have for that. And if you served before September 7th of 1980, that will also make you eligible for that stuff. So whatever time you spent on active duty status or training purposes, that doesn't just count towards the service requirements, okay? So it adds on. And again, it's individually based what they will look at to determine that eligibility and stuff for you for the VA healthcare system. Now, some of the things you're going to have to gather in order for you to fill out the application and so forth and everything else. Of course, they're going to need your Social Security number, especially if you do not have a disability claim in place. That information is not going to be there. Okay, so Social Security numbers for you, your spouse, and any other qualified dependents. Because your dependents could possibly also be eligible to get coverage under the VA healthcare system depending on your disabilities and your disability rating that the VA gave you for disability compensation. So that's another thing that you might want to take a look at, because your spouses and qualified dependents could also be eligible for this as long as they're not covered under TRICARE or they qualify for TRICARE. That's another way, especially if your disabilities don't allow you to work and have a job that gives you any kind of healthcare coverages or the opportunity to get benefits. This could be something else that can help you with an expense that you might not have to worry about, or at least it not be so much as if you were to get some kind of civilian company out there to provide the healthcare coverage for you. Okay, you're also going to need military discharge information. Okay, so DD-214. They're going to make sure that they have that stuff. And if you submit this electronically, they're going to ask you to upload a copy of that. Now, the VA does get a copy of your DD-214, but it's always important for you to get it to them. And if they ask you for a fax copy, get it to them as soon as possible. The faster you get it to them, the faster they're going to receive it, and the faster your application is going to get actually processed. Now, they're also going to ask for any other type of insurance coverages that you may have, whether it's TRICARE or any other kind of company that you have for your family dependents and the individual veteran. Okay, so that includes Medicare, private insurance, or any other insurance that you may get from any other employer or stuff like that. Now, there is some optional information that they will ask for, and that is how income, the year's income or the gross household income from the previous year for you, the veteran, the spouse, and any of your dependents. And this includes income from any job or any of the other sources that you may receive income from to help determine your eligibility as far as income-wise for your application. Any deductibles for expenses that you had for the last past years, healthcare, education costs. And this is going to lower the amount of money that they're going to count as your income for that. Now, as far as the income goes, a lot of people ask, well, why the heck does the VA need that information from me anyway? It's really none of their business and why they need it and stuff. Okay, so, and this is why the VA needs this, okay? So whenever you apply, they're going to review all the information that you submit to them. Okay, your service history, your VA disability rating is a big one. Your income level, and that's going to determine, what you're qualified for along with your dependents. The eligibility for Medicaid, VA disability compensation, VA pension benefits, all those things. And they use this information to help to decide three things. One, what type of VA healthcare benefits are you eligible for? How soon can they actually enroll you in the VA healthcare system? And how much, if anything, that you may have to pay towards the cost of your healthcare. So, they give veterans with service-connected disabilities the highest priority when it comes to VA healthcare. And they do ask about other health insurance for billing only, because if you have other insurance companies, then we want to make sure that it doesn't affect your eligibility for VA healthcare, which it does not. It does not affect your ability to actually qualify for the VA healthcare. Now, again, you can start your application on va.gov. You can start it there to make sure that it's ready to go. Now, once you apply, they start the process of your healthcare application within about a week or so. And again, they're going to send a letter in the mail with the decision what to decide about your VA healthcare. So again, let's go back to last week when we talked about updating your information on va.gov and e-benefits to make sure they have the correct information. Because remember, they're going to go ahead and mail you all these documents that they're going to determine on your case for your eligibility for the VA healthcare system. Okay, and if for whatever reason you don't receive a decision letter within a week after you apply, make sure that don't hesitate. Okay, do not apply again. That's one thing. Do not apply, and give the VA a call. And the number for everybody to be able to call to speak to them about healthcare is 877-222-8387. And if you need the TTY, it's 711. And they're always open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to answer any questions that you may have regarding your application for the VA healthcare system. So understand that to make sure you have that. Now, remember that through va.gov, you can save a lot of time when you fill out these applications by actually signing into your va.gov account, because this way all your information is already going to be pre-filled in all of your applications to make sure you have that. So always remember, it's always a good thing for you to apply for VA healthcare. You're never going to know if you're eligible for it unless you apply. And this could be something that is beneficial to you, to your family, to your dependents, because it could be something that you don't have to stress out about as much, because you might be eligible for this coverage under the VA healthcare system. Okay, so again, take advantage of it. These benefits are there for you as a veteran, for you to be eligible to use. And again, from my own experience, I've never had any negative issues at all whatsoever with the VA healthcare system, because anytime that I go in and I need to set up an appointment or anything like that to see any kind of specialist or anything, I go in, request the appointment, usually within a day or two, they contact me right away to go ahead and set up an appointment. Now, depending on where your VA medical center is, that's where all the specialists and everything are at. And if for whatever reason the VA can't get you in there right away, usually within 30 days, they will send you out in town. They do have contracts with doctors out in the community for them to be able to see you, so they can see you as soon as possible. And that is something that in the past couple of years has gotten so much better, that the VA makes sure that their veterans are actually taken care of. So again, take advantage of this. I can't say that enough. The application is going to take you about 30 minutes for you to fill it out. About 30 minutes for you to fill out the application, and then about a week or so, that's when they average to give you a decision back about your health care. Even if you don't have disability compensation, you can go ahead and apply and get coverage under this, and they will give you a letter at the end of every single year stating that you've had health care coverage for the whole entire year. That way you can turn that in whenever you do your taxes and stuff, so you have that, and they do provide that. So lastly, take advantage of it. Okay, let's not be hard-headed and let our pride get into all this and apply for VA healthcare. The Quarter Deck is brought to you by Miguel Science Photography. From the beginning of your family to the first birthday and beyond. Whether it's a retirement or a Marine Corps ball, Miguel Science Photography is there to make memories that will last a lifetime. Miguel Science Photography is a certified veteran-owned business. Contact them at miguelsciencephotography.com.
What we're going to do right here is go back. Way back into time.
Last week we talked about the operational planning, and we talked about the option of the 1st Marine Division going through Baghdad and the plan of Baghdad operations once they got there, and working with other forces and stuff like that to make sure that happened. Well, this week we're going to talk a little bit about what their the 1st Marine Division was actually doing to get that into place, and as far as any other kind of planning that maybe was in the works to get to happen. So now it's time to refine, the base plan that they're coming up with to get the 1st Marine Division in there to accomplish the mission and to actually make it as smooth as possible for them to get in and get out and, maintain the way that the Marine Corps handles business whenever they go into any kind of combat environment. So let's move in and talk a little bit more about that operational planning and the refinement of the actual base plan that they had into place. Seizure of Iraq's South Rumaila oil infrastructure intact would have a tremendous impact on the ability of the coalition to stabilize and rebuild Iraq after victory on the battlefield. To the coalition forces, the seizure of the oil infrastructure rivaled the seizure of Baghdad in importance. The Iraqis recognized this fact and had made public statements that they would take action to ensure the oil infrastructure did not fall into U.S. hands. The Iraqis had created an ecological and financial disaster 12 years before by destroying the Kuwaiti oil fields, and they threatened to do the same to their own if they were to be lost in the coalition in any way. The division was faced with a dilemma. Clearly, the Iraqis on Safwan Hill and their agents in Kuwait wouldn't be aware of any operational move made by the division. Because of this, a guaranteed operational compromise, it would be necessary to generate tactical surprise if there was to be any chance of securing the oil infrastructure intact. The MEF planners began to review the planned timing and sequencing for seizure of the Mina al-Bakar offshore terminal, or Maboot, and manifold assemblies on the A1 Fall Peninsula, as well as the seizure of the Ghost and pump situations of the South Rumaila fields. Any attempt to seize one would certainly signal the Iraqis to begin the planned destruction of the other. Thus, simultaneous seizure of all the critical nodes was required to preserve the entire system. So in other words, being able to get there at the exact same time to be able to seize both locations, to be able to make sure that there was no chance in hell that they would be able to destroy these oil fields. Now, if we look back in history, we can remember that what they're talking about that happened 12 years ago in Kuwait, they set them all on fire. They set them on fire, and that was one of the biggest disasters that happened during that whole war campaign. And of course, the 1st Marine Division didn't want a repeat of that situation. The division did not know what the Iraqis' trigger for destruction of the oil field infrastructure would be. If the trigger was ground maneuver, a deception plan would have to be crafted. If the trigger was the beginning of a coalition air campaign, there was a risk posted by and a delay between the onset of air operations and ground attack. In the earliest stages of operational planning, there had been a 4-day gap. It was imposed by force flow constraints between when forces would be sufficiently available to conduct air operations and when limited ground by events. The residual 4-day planning gap was never closed. The commencement of air operations, A-Day, and the planned ground attack, G-Day, remained 4 days apart. If this timing was executed as planned, the Iraqis would have at least a 4-day warning that a coalition attack had begun, easily giving them time to destroy the critical infrastructures. Division planners argued vigorously for a simultaneous air and ground attack. The objectives of the air campaign were strategic and not mutually exclusive with simultaneously ground attacks in the South Rumaila. Since shaping of military targets in the South was virtually non-existent in the 4-day air campaign, there was no increased risk to ground forces conducting a simultaneous attack. The division accepted the risk that a rapid seizure of the oil fields would mean less shaping fires on the enemy defenders, but balanced that with the risk of the strategic objective of gaining the oil fields intact. The arguments made by the division and the 1MEF planners were initially unsuccessful, leading one planner to note, "We can't care about this infrastructure more than higher headquarters does. If they are aware of the risk and the destruction is a cost they must accept." Even after significant lobbying in the highest levels, the situation remained unresolved until the last moment, causing hasty planning sessions of the division's forces were crossing the line of departure months later. The division prepared to go into the attack as early as A1 day and as late as A+4 days. In coincidence with 1MEF, the division did lobby and receive permission to conduct pre-G-Day security zone operations and maneuver operations in Kuwait that would condition the enemy to movement in the vicinity of the borders. These actions would enable the early insertion of reconnaissance assets or a light armored enemy and provide some degree of tactical surprise regarding the division's timing, main effort, and specific objectives. Capitulation of enemy units was another topic of much discussion at this time. However, headquarters had made a distinction between an organized unit action to cooperate with the coalition and conventional surrender of enemy individuals or defeated units. One of the central themes of the Information Operations, or the IO, campaign was to allow the Iraqi commanders the opportunity to signal their cooperation with coalition forces, capitulate, in order to avoid their destruction. Although this concept gained some level of support at high levels, the distinction was somewhat lost on the Marines of the division, who necessarily had no focus on the wholesale destruction of the enemy should he fight. The care taken by the IO planners in their attempt to ensure the enemy units were advised of the timing and some of the planning for their destruction also struck many in the division as an unnecessary risk. There was even talk of offering the Iraqis' 51st Mechanized Division in the Ramallah oil fields a specific window of opportunity to capitulate, which would have given the Iraqis clear advance notice to begin oil infrastructure destruction. Marveled one member of the division, "We can't win this war by being nice. If they need killing, we're going to kill them. If they don't, then they will be treated appropriately." During the actual attack, these enemy units that did not desire to fight simply melted away, and there was no capitulation of significance among forces in the division zone. Another refinement of the base plan was a retasking of the Combat Engineer Battalion, which will be made up of the elements of both the 1st and the 2nd CEBs. There were multiple engineering tasks that would have to be accomplished in support of the opening attacks. Breaching the obstacles on the Kuwaiti side of the border was only the first. Obstacles on the far side of the border remained a question mark. Although the Iraqis had not been observing making overt defensive preparations near the border, the division was reluctant to declare the border area free of any kind of mines or obstacles. In any case, the attack corridors and the division planned to use crossed the defensive areas of the Iraqi Republican Guard during the First Gulf War. In effect, the battle space given to the Marines required maneuvering through a 12-year-old impact area. Even with no recent mining of these areas, the potential for residential impacts from abandoned minefields and unexploded ordnance was high. Because of the uncertainty surrounding the disposition of minefields of the Iraqi side of the border, the CEB would not be involved in the initial breach beyond supervision of the preparation, position, and number of breach lanes for the division. Instead, the division would hold them ready for minefield and obstacle breaching north of the border, where speed, cohesion, and efficiency would be critical. The division arranged for the Kuwaitis to breach their own obstacle belts, to be accomplished in the last day preceding H hour. Additional support will be provided by the U.S. Navy Seabees from the MEF's Engineer Group, or the MEG, and the USMC Engineer Support Battalions. Planning for a heliborne assault capability also began early in the planning process. Recognizing the terrain impacts of the ground maneuver, the division expected that helicopter assaults of key bridges, interdiction of routes, and turning movement of the enemy's defensive positions could be necessary during the upcoming campaign. The division established a close relationship with the planners of both MAG 39 and MAG 16. For example, planners from the 1st Battalion, 4th Marines, working with embarked staff from the MAG 16, would, while en route to Kuwait aboard the USS Boxer, LHD 6, hey, the Boxer, that is one ship that I will always remember because it was a nice ship, and that's the one that we actually floated on for a little while. And we'll talk about that once we talk about our travels back from Iraq back to the United States. So let's get back to our story. So the USS Boxer conducted a series of planning and helicopter load exercises to determine the maximum number of assault Marines that could be loaded into the CH-53 Echo helicopters. They also refined the procedures for conducting CASEVACs in an NBC environment. Collectively, the division planners developed a battalion-sized lift package that could be applied nearly anywhere, provided and established criteria for this type of mission when it was met. Several potential objectives were considered for this mission package. The Kalat Sikar airfield, potential crossing site of the Tigris River, and the Maria airfield, Al Qurna, oil infrastructure, nodes, even various airfields near Baghdad, in case of a rapid collapse scenario, were all considered as possible objectives for this method. Another potential early objective was a heliborne assault from the Rumalia Oilfields highway bridge over the Hammer Marsh. The bridge had proven difficult to destroy during a recent MEFEX exercise and had become known as the Alamo Bridge. Outside of Al-Bazarah, this bridge was the only link between Rumalia Oilfield and the south of the quadrants of combat power from the Iraqi 3 and 4 Corps. Without it, the enemy could only attack via Al-Barah. If the enemy wished to reinforce the Rumalia forces, support would likely come from the 6th Armored Division over the Alamo Bridge in northern Rumalia Oilfields. The need to block any reinforcing efforts of the 6th Armored Division might be accomplished by the helicopter assault. The division conducted the investigate this option, which resulted in a detailed list of decision points. The division and the 3rd MA collectively compiled a comprehensive list of go or no-go criteria for a helicopter insert and applied the criteria to this situation. Among the criteria were the same requirements to conduct a force link-up and presence or absence of surface-to-air missiles, or SAMs, anti-aircraft artillery, AAA, and man-portable air defense, MANPADS, threats that might be available. The presence of armor or mechanized units in the objective area, along with the effects of Iraqi artillery upon the landing forces, were other significant conditions to consider. Although the risk involved in the Alamo Bridge operation might prove to be too high, the detailed planning for the helicopter assault and teaming with 3rd MA planners was in place to speed execution on the battlefield if it should have the conditions that would permit it. Now, one of the other things that was important in regards to all of this was actually developing some kind of fire support plan. And we'll get into that a little bit more next week when we start talking about what the division's plan was in order to provide fire support for those units that were on the ground. Now that's near and dear to my heart because that's us. It's talking about the unit that I was with and more focused on artillery firepower to provide that fire support to all those units that were on the ground to ensure that the enemy in front of us was going to be annihilated and allow them to have passage a lot faster into Baghdad as the 1st Marine Division progressed into that aspect. So again, we'll get into that a little bit more next week when we start moving along with our book, No Better Friend, No Worst Enemy, with the 1st Marine Division in Iraq of 2003. Hero highlight. You know, when I look back and I start thinking about why the hell did I join the Marine Corps? Not only was it because I thought the uniform, was sexy and people were going to like the way that I looked in the uniform, but then I started thinking about all those individuals that came before I did, the things that they did, the things that I heard about that actually helped me to make the decision into actually enlisting into the Marine Corps back when I graduated high school in 1995. And throughout the whole time that you're on active duty, you hear these stories of the Dan Dailies, the Smedley Butlers, all those stories that you hear about, the things that they did during that time, during World War II and all those times. And that is why the reason that we want to talk about a lot of these heroes, especially the ones that receive the Medal of Honor, the highest award that you can possibly receive. And today we're going to talk about a private first class by the name of Richard Beatty Anderson, United States Marine Corps. He was another one of the Medal of Honor recipients. And let's go over his citation, and then we can talk a little bit more about what he did and why he deserved this honor. Private First Class Richard B. Anderson, who hurled himself on a live grenade in a shell hole in Roy Island, Kwajalein Atoll, Marshall Islands, to save the lives of 3 buddies, though he knew death for himself was almost certain, was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration. Roy Island was one of the first pre-war Japanese territories to fall to Marines. PFC Anderson, a member of the invasion force, was hunting enemy snipers when he chose the shell hole in the center of Roy Airfield as a point of vantage from which to attack Japanese positions. The 22-year-old Marine, who tattooed on his arm with the inscription, "Death before dishonor," was evacuated to a ship where he died of his wounds on 1 February of 1944. He was buried at sea with full military honors. Black-haired and ruddy complexion, Richard Beatty Anderson, who was just 5.5 feet tall, was born in Tacoma, Washington. On 26 June of 1921, he attended McClay School and Sequam High School. He worked for 11 months in Richmond Shipyards, Richmond, California, before entering the Marine Corps on 6 July of 1942 in Oakland, California. Transferred to the Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego, California for his recruit training, he next joined the Marine Barracks Naval Receiving Station in San Diego in October of 1942. Promoted to Private First Class on 12 April of 1943, he was ordered to the Infantry Battalion Training Center, Camp Elliott, San Diego, shortly afterwards. He next joined his last unit, Company E, 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines, and with his unit, he departed from the United States in January of 1944. The following months, he landed in the Marshall Islands. The Medal of Honor was presented to his parents by Rear Admiral Sherwood A. Taffender, United States Navy, then Commandant of the 13th Naval District of Seattle, Washington. In addition to the Medal of Honor, he was posthumously awarded the Purple Heart, Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal, and the World War II Victory Medal. Throwing your own ass on top of a grenade. Think about that for 1 second. You know what the hell a grenade's going to do to you. You know that if you land on top of that grenade, it's most likely you're probably going to end up dying because you're absorbing the whole entire blast into your body. Thinking back down there and, during that time and that campaign, the kind of equipment and gear that these individuals had on really wasn't that protective of blasts and stuff like that. So this young Private First Class knew what was going to happen when he jumped on top of this grenade and simply he absorbed the whole entire blast of that grenade to make sure that those 3 buddies that were in there with him in that shell hole were going to be okay. They're going to be taken care of, and they're going to be able to go home to their families. Think about that for just 1 second. Put yourself in that kind of situation. Would you have the discipline to jump on top of that grenade and not be concerned at all whatsoever about your well-being in order to save those individuals that are next to you? Now, this is something that is instilled into Marines every single day, that we want to make sure that we take care of our individual, of the persons, the Marines, the brothers, the sisters that are to our left and to our right of us. But I can't say yes or no that I'm going to jump on top of that grenade because I'm not in that situation. Being put in that kind of situation, you're going to react the way that you need to react right away, and to make sure that those individuals are going to be okay. Because, to think about it, would I just simply go on there? I'm not sure. I don't know. I can't say yes and I can't say no. I just can't imagine myself in that kind of situation. Because by far, yes, do I want to take care of the Marines that are in there with me? Of course. That is my objective. That is my mission. I want to make sure that they are taken care of. But unless I'm put in that kind of situation, I don't know. I don't know the reactions that my Marines would have, that I would have, being put in that kind of situation. But yet, this young private first class, without a second thought in his mind, dove on top of that grenade, saved the life of his 3 buddies, and was given the highest honor that it can possibly be given, in an award. Now, it was given to his parents because, of course, he wasn't there because he was buried at sea. He was buried at sea and giving full military honors during that time. So what a great honor to be able to receive that award. And, by far, wow, to this young PFC, that he gave his life in order to save those Marines next to him. The Quarterdeck. If you're just tuning into us, you're listening to the Quarterdeck with Gunny Science. And this week we talked about VA healthcare. It's our first introduction into talking about the healthcare system with the Department of Veterans Affairs. Now, it was just a simple introduction on how to apply and all that stuff. But, in my opinion, I think by far next to the disability compensation, the VA healthcare is probably the next most important benefit that you have that you should take advantage of. So go back and listen to that segment and see how you may determine your eligibility for you to be determined for that benefit. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the services and stuff that they actually provide once your application is processed and you're deemed to be eligible. What exactly is the coverage going to be for you? We'll talk about that next week. We're not going to get too far ahead of ourselves because I want to make sure that we have all the information that we need. And always remember, all the information, everything that I get for our podcast comes directly from va.gov, our go-to website to get any information and all new updates regarding anything dealing with the VA. Well, what can I say about the 1st Marine Division? The planning is starting to come into place because now they are learning and understanding what the enemy needs to do in order for the division to be able to move into place to make sure that certain areas are taken before the enemy has any time to react and maybe destroy those areas. So those things are coming into place. Now, next week, we're going to talk about fire support. How is the division going to receive and use the fire support for all of those units that are on the ground? And like I said, it's near and dear to my heart because fire support, that is our mission. As an artilleryman, we provide fire and support and maneuver to all units in front of us. That is what we do. And that is our short part in this book that we're reading because that is what we did. That is my expertise of what I was on the ground actually doing in the maneuver from crossing the border from Kuwait to Iraq, making our way all the way into Baghdad and then all the way up north to Tikrit. We'll get into that a little bit more next week, though, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. And as well as our hero highlights go, we talked about Private First Class Richard B.D. Anderson. And, his story is an amazing one because it's just amazing, truly, what these individuals do when it comes to the heroic things that they did in order to receive these awards. Now, next week, we're going to talk about Major Kenneth D. Bailey. I'm not going to get ahead of myself, so next week we'll go over his award, why he received the Medal of Honor, and move on with our hero highlights so we can learn a little bit more. And remember, all the ones that we're talking about right now are during World War II between 1941 and 1945. And if you're eager to learn more about these individuals, you can always go to the Marine Corps University website, and you can actually take a look at all the Medal of Honor citations there to make sure that you can look up anybody that you may be interested in looking, whether it's somebody that received the award most recently for the campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan, or wherever you may want to do research on. So again, you've been listening to the Quarterdeck. This is Miguel, the Gunny Signs, sounding Liberty Call.
Get out the box!
I do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.